Welcome back to our Passover series. This is the final segment of our four-part series. On Passover evening, at Seder night, we will have the opportunity to perform 5 different commandments, 5 mitzvahs. I'd like to take a few minutes with you and just explain how we perform and what the significance is of each one of these commandments. The first commandment that we can fulfill is the commandment to eat matzah on Seder evening. Now remember, matzah has a dual symbolism. On one hand, it's the bread of affliction. On the other hand, it is symbolic of getting back to basics, humility, lack of ego, lack of arrogance. So when we are eating the matzah, we're going to have both of these concepts in our minds. When we eat the matzah, we have to recline. There are 2 kinds of matzahs one can find. One is the round, handmade matzahs, and the other one are the normal square ones that you find in the supermarket. Now, if you're eating the round matzah, a person must eat 1/2 of that matzah. If you're eating the square matzahs, then you must eat 2/3 of an entire matzah. How long do you have to eat it? Well, you should really eat it between 2 and 9 minutes. In other words, you're going to make the blessing, sit down, recline as if you're a king, and then just munch away on the matzah. And a person really should not speak from the time they begin eating the matzah to the time they finish eating the matzah. The next commandment a person can fulfill, also from the Torah, is to tell over to your children the story of the Jewish people leaving Egypt. This will be accomplished simply by reading the words of the Haggadah. Now, not all the words of the Haggadah need to be read, and the details behind which words you need to say and which words you don't need to say are beyond the scope of the series. However, suffice to say for now that if you tell the story on how the Jewish people, we started originally, our ancestors were idolaters, the most disgusting beings around, and eventually we came to the concept of the Almighty, and we went down to slavery for 400 years to Egypt, and then the Almighty determined with a strong hand, outstretched arm, brought us out of Egypt, salvation, where we stood at Mount Sinai to receive the Torah, and eventually made it to the land of Israel. If one explains that, the significance how God runs the world, God destroyed the Egyptians and elevated the Jewish people, so then they will fulfill that commandment of telling over the story of Egypt to your children. When the Torah says to your children, it means anyone you can have influence over, which means especially yourself. A person should make sure that when they read the Haggadah, they tell the story, that it's inspiring for them to do more mitzvahs and to follow in the ways of the Almighty. The next 3 commandments are all of rabbinic nature. First one is Maror. Now, Maror can be accomplished by 2 ways. One is by eating horseradish root, or the ground horseradish root, but 3 tablespoons worth. Or the next one is having romaine lettuce. But if you have about 3 romaine lettuce stalks, a section 3 inches by 5 inches, and you sit and you eat them, then you fulfill that commandment of eating maror. Now, the symbolism of maror is actually fascinating. If you're using the horseradish root, it burns, it's hard, it's pressure. If you're just eating the lettuce, so it's a very subtle kind of bitterness. We have to remember that in life, we all have bitterness. We all have challenges. There's no shame in being a food addict or an alcoholic or any kind of ego or arrogance. There is a tragedy, however, if we don't deal with the alcoholism or the food addiction or the ego, the arrogance. Maror shocks us into that concept of understanding our lives are bitter. There are things in our lives that are holding us back, and a person should never allow themselves to become complacent and just live day to day without dealing with their challenges in a way they can grow and become bigger and better people. Sometimes our challenges are bitter and they hit us smack in the face and we're forced to deal with them. But that's the horseradish root. But sometimes, like the romaine lettuce, it's a very subtle bitterness. Person literally can go their whole lives and never really deal with their issues that they need to deal with in order to become a great person. Maror forces us to deal with our issues. Maror reminds us of the bitterness the Jewish people experienced as slaves in Egypt and reminds us of the bitterness we have in our lives. The next commandment is the 4 cups of wine. When we say 4 cups of wine, we mean 4 cups of wine. It should be a minimum of 3.3 ounces or half a glass of wine that we are drinking. Preferably red wine. If you can't drink wine, then you can use grape juice. When a person drinks the wine, they should recline on their left-hand side. And the idea of the wine is each cup is another stage of redemption. It's representative of becoming a freer person and a freer person and a freer person. Just like royalty would drink the wine, so too we're going to drink the wine on Seder evening and allow ourselves to really feel good by the end of the evening. The final commandment. If I was careful and I ate my matzah and I told the story of the redemption and I recognized that my life was bitter and I have to rise to the challenge to deal with that bitternesses. And if I stopped and I drank my 4 cups of wine, so I began to feel good about myself, feel good about my world. So then that leads me to the final mitzvah, the mitzvah of saying Hallel. Hallel is praising the Almighty for all of the blessings that He gives me and all of the blessings He gives the world. The way we accomplish this is again by reading the particular sections in the Haggadah. These are a collection of psalms that help us focus on how fortunate we are to be one of the Almighty's children. I hope and pray that all of you have a blessed Passover, as we say, a Chag Kosher v'Sameach, a holiday that is filled with joy, that is done the right way, and a holiday that allows you to open up the windows of redemption for you and your family.